All right, so I think, actually what I'll do is I'll just see if anyone has any questions to start off with, because we've had 3 webinars so far, and I'm not sure whether I mentioned this last time, but quite an amazing thing happened after the 3rd webinar. And so I was told what the subjects were to be, and then I created the webinar around the subject that they wanted me to talk about. And of course, to me, they were 3 sort of quite interesting, connected, but still relatively individual topics. And it was only, I think, a couple of weeks after the last one, which is the structure of space, I found a document which talked about 3 subjects going back about 20 years or so, and it had the 3 subjects of the 3 topics that we'd covered in 3 webinars listed in a document, all within the same page. And it's just one of those things where you keep finding these kinds of things, and you have to look for them. People often want to have more experiences than they have, but we have to look for them. When we know that we live in a construct, and we know that it's created for a purpose, and we know that it's an artificial system based upon memory that once was, and we're a part of the construct in duality, which means we have a physical human consciousness which is a part of the construct, which is a part of the memory of the way Earth was once represented. But we also have a part of us which is real, which comes from beyond the construct. So we live in a state of duality. And it's one of the most profoundly important things to realise, because we spend a lot of time trying to understand our purpose of our life, which is absolutely one of the most valid questions of all, of course. What is the purpose? What is our purpose? As human beings, we need to have a driving force in our life. We need to have something to give us motivation, something that burns our heart, and something that fires up our mind. And so looking for purpose is important, but then we have to be observant, because living in a construct, if we experience it as a construct, for those who have seen the documentary, that's a very small 4-hour section of Diane's and my life with the amount of experiences that we have had. But we have to look for the little things as well. And so when I say that after the 3rd webinar, this document appeared, it only appeared because I followed the signs, I followed the feelings, I followed the dates, and and it led me to a document which was in a random pile, which I happened to just pull out at the right moment to have this document right in front of me, and there's the 3 subjects that we've already talked about in sequence, spoken about a long, long time ago. And it shows that the greater part of us, because we look at Alonis, we hear his name, we look at the documents, and I'm still preparing a lot of documents for the next book, which will be a showcase and a much more specific book called The Real Illusion. It will be about all the way back to Lemuria and Atlantis. It will travel through Mars, Egypt, here, and it will travel through interdimensional and interspatial reality, and it will go through cycles of the construct. And the structure of space alludes to some of the information, but it will be a book written in the format of taking large excerpts of what they have spoken about over the years and putting them into context that we can sort of understand with our human mind in a linear fashion. So that's the project I'm working on now. And so what it means is they know what they're doing. And what it means is when we look for these little signs and we find these things happen, we have to take notice of them. And you may not get the answer today, you may not get the answer tomorrow, but they'll stitch together like a chain. And then when we have observations and connecting together with maybe dreams or with signs, symbols, then we start to get a sense of momentum and we start to get a sense of understanding. So I think it's just being vigilant. So it was an example of just that we have to be vigilant all the time, because there's so much beauty in what it is. And I find these things every day, but I do spend a lot of time looking for them. But it's because they appear, not because I look for them, if that makes sense. So if there's no questions to start off with, I might just go straight to, I guess, the question that Pauline had sent through, which I think is a really good way to start, because it caps off some of the previous discussion about where we are. If everyone's happy, I can perhaps just read the question and then we can start from there. The question alluded to light language and purpose, which I want to get back to, because I don't know what she means by that. I know what I mean by that, but I don't know what she means by that. And the main core of the question was about the difference between the oversoul and God and the universe. And so, and what's the difference, essentially, was the question. So I think what I'd like to do is, if it's okay with everybody, is just go back and reiterate how we arrive here and what happens in that process to become a human being from where we come from, which is beyond the matrix, which is, we loosely call it the real. Now, what does that mean? It means the real universe, not a constructed universe. And again, even that is a concept which we have to go with our feelings to understand as well as our mind, because I think the documentary also makes the point that when you're inside a box, you can't necessarily see outside the box. You have to go with what you know inside, and that's the core here. Is we're built and impregnated with memories, layered memories that are designed to only be activated at certain times. So that's called a time delay mechanism that Alanis spoke about in the mid-90s. That when the time is right, memory is activated. When the time is right, energy is activated. And as human beings, we get very impatient sometimes because we are desperate for purpose. We're desperate for meaning. We live in a world which is less than desirable. We live in a world where we have a heart and soul beating for something that makes sense, and around us we can't find it. So it comes down to the fact that we do need purpose, but there's also a need to be not patient but aware that there is a time delay mechanism with certain things that happen, and our lives have been filled with things that happen at the right time for the right reason. And probably the short version of that is that's why awareness is so important, and non-judgmental awareness. What is our image and our expectation of our life, and what do we feel inside? Because sometimes the feeling says, I'll wait, and the mind says, but I want. And so we have to be very aware to balance the thoughts with the energy of our feelings. Because if we're impatient, we will be vibrating because of maybe a human need, or because of a fear, or because of a want, which is, again, that's okay, but we have to put it in context to the greater plan, which means that the greater part of us, which is us, knows what it's doing. Now, that isn't just accepting it willy-nilly and saying that, well, whatever happens, happens. We're still responsible, and to meet the greater plan halfway. And that's a phrase that Diane and I used to use, and I still use all the time, is meeting the greater plan halfway. And what that means is doing everything we can to be as aware as we can, but also knowing that we're a small part of a very big picture. We're a small part of a very big wheel that's turning. And sometimes that wheel needs a lot of time to turn. I have had, probably just to get a little personal and a slight segue again, but still answering the question, this year, because I first met Diane in 1993, and I spent that year going to different workshops, going to different groups and discussion groups, then I was invited to a weekly discussion group in the start of 1994. And so my major communication records and my major experiences started in 1993, but really became prolific in 1994. And 1994 and 1995 were the two most powerful years in terms of documents. So they were the largest bulk of communications in those 2 years. And we found out, of course, that they had to squeeze a lot into a certain amount of time because of simulation, as they had called it then, was going to finish at the end of 1995, and we didn't know what that meant. What it meant was, if we look back at the Structure of Space documentary, or Structure of Space webinar, that at the end of 1995, they removed some of the protective layers between where we are and what we call duplicate space, which is where most of our people got stuck. And so the simulation, which was protected from exposure, the veil was lifted. So the end of 1995 was a marker in time where they had to put a lot of information in before that. And what that meant was we had a lot of channeling sessions, a lot of group sessions, a lot of research and weekend work sessions where we would be spending the whole weekend on whiteboards and hearing them talk and researching documents and trying to understand what they were saying. So my point is, 30 years later last year and 30 years later this year, I'm having a more of an understanding of so many things than I ever have before. And it takes time. And so 30 years later, you can imagine the feeling where you think, my goodness, this connects to 30 years ago on the same day 30 years later. And this has happened to me many, many times this year and last year. And so, but again, the point is things take time. But if we're vigilant and we are recording our journey, because your personal journey is the most important thing in your world. And so, if you don't mind me saying, when you record your journey, when you're aware of your pattern, when you're aware of how your energy speaks to you, when you're aware of how your energy moves through your life, how it communicates to you, you will define a pattern, you will define a resonance, you will define meaning in the little things, because the little things tell you about the big things. I'll give you a quick example. Again, it's a personal one, but I don't mind. So today is the 17th of December. 7 days ago, it was 70 months since Diane passed away. And the amount of sevens I have seen coming through my life today, it's beyond random and it's beyond statistics. And so I first became aware of this I woke up on the 10th and I knew it was 70 months on that day. And Diane was very close, and I had this feeling, it wasn't an ask meaning a question, but I had this feeling I needed to take a drive out. I had a day off, I took a drive out, a long way, a place I'd never been before. And on the way back, just as I was having a lot of information sort of come into my mind that I'll come back and I'll research this doc, I'll have a look at this and have a look at this. On the highway in front of me, a car pulled off to the side, and in front of me was a 777 number plate. And then as I realised, oh, okay, that's great, 777, because what people need to realise is that on the way to the shift, which was where Diane passed away, we were told in the mid-90s that 777 was the code word for the shift, so 7 times 7 and 7 more. And so I would not know until the day I was really on my way driving down Route 777 in Melbourne to get to this hospital. And so these permutations of 777 came over and over and over again. So on this day last week, it's 70 months later, and this car in front of me, 777. As I acknowledged that, another car pulled up alongside it, 777. And then alongside it on the right side, another car pulled up with a 666. And what I knew is that next year's 2026. And because of all the sevens lining up, there was one more number to go, which meant next year. And then 2027, which is another 7, of course, is after one more year's time. So my point is that I didn't look for this, but I was aware of the coding. I was aware of the meaning. And whilst I'm sharing a very personal moment in my life and a very difficult moment in my life, 17 months later there is a permutation of that energy signature in the program. And then today, which is 7 days later, there is other permutations of the same number pattern. So what it means is that when we look for the signs and we look for the information and we start to learn about how our frequency works, I have a number pattern that's relative to my numbers, and this is where numerology, astrology, it all interlinks. There isn't one that's only right and the others are not right. They're all interlinked because they created the construct to use these mathematical and energetic signatures. So the point being, when you find things that make sense to your energy and you research them and you follow them, I'd be saying to you, you will find more meaning and guidance, because I think guidance is one of the biggest things that we look for. So, slight segue, but I think an important thing to just to talk about. I just like to share things that I think show the wonder of a greater plan in our life. So, if there's no questions about that, I want to go into this reference here. So, the oversoul, God, and the universe, and it's a very good topic because the way we arrive here, it's very specific. Essentially, we are an energy that is not human. We are an energy of light. We are an energy that is from beyond here. And of course, we had to come to Earth as a human program because Earth was the centre point of the agenda that took place against humanity, which caused all this to be here in the first place. So Earth was the beginning of the issue, shall we say. And so it's a very important point to access through to the duplicate space. Of course, again, the duplicate space is where the greater energy fell. That's where people got caught up. And so Earth is very important as an entry point. So this is a construct. It's a very small construct. This is why the flat Earth concept and the flat Earth structure is important, because it is a small construct program alongside and within the space of a very big construct program, which has the duplicate Earth, and this is the simulated Earth. So again, these are very important things to take note of, because this is only a very small program, but vital, because without this program there was no interface to the duplicate program, which of course was the copy that was made and where a lot of things went very, very wrong. So when we enter into this reality, we have to adopt a memory, because light can't exist within the past unless it has a memory structure, a coding structure. It's like all things. You can't recognize a frequency unless you use the same frequency. Otherwise, you're not on the same wavelength. And so our light energy entered in through the universal frequency, so the chamber of the universal frequency spectrum. And then in order for us to take on a human being, we had to adopt a human body. Now, a human body has a soul. And a soul, even in the memory construct, and the soul belongs to a soul group. And so the way the human evolution works is that they are soul groups. And contrary to what a lot of people believe, each soul doesn't just have its own series of lessons. It is a part of a collective soul group. And so a collective soul group, which is one of the main energies, and there's many soul groups, but it's a major energy within the Earth evolutionary frequency. Soul groups have a need to discover many, many things. And so it sends out many, many aspects, or many, many fragments of itself. So filaments of light, many fragments of itself. And it may send out 100 fragments of itself into 100 different people living 100 different lives. And each one of those people living those lives will have their own reincarnation cycle. So some might have 1, some might have 10, some might have more than 10. When the person has finished experiencing what the soul group needed to experience, that filament of light, that fragment, is retracted back. And so the idea that a human being has its own karmic cycle that is conclusively and independently its own is not true. It does, but at the same time it's a part of a greater soul's experience. So what we have is our energy of light enters into a soul group. It adopts and takes a copy of a blueprint of a soul from the soul group, and then we infuse that blueprint of a soul, and we need that blueprint of a soul to have an interface and to have a relativity coding system that can then be born into the Earth as a human being. So energy of light adopts a blueprint of a soul from Earth, and then that soul is born into a human being. And it's all coordinated and orchestrated. So we have, for example, an imprint of a soul, and all of us here will have a main soul imprint, such as Jason, Maria, Eileen, Tracy, Kathleen, Gracie, all have a soul imprint. But that imprint is then modified. So we have a purpose. We are from the real. We have a light structure. So our light structure has a purpose. It essentially commandeers our body with a copy, and then it moves into this structure of reality, and it has a purpose. So to fulfill that purpose, what it needs other imprints. And so it takes other memories of other lives we've never lived, and imprints them into our structure of energy. So we have not only the lives that we as a human being memory have lived, but we have other lives that we've never lived, but they reside within us as if we have lived them. Because we're not here to learn lessons. We don't need all the long, slow journey. We need the shortcuts. We need the information. It's like when you look at in the Matrix film, when they were putting Neo in, they uploaded the program. Really a similar concept. So but somewhat more gracefully, I might add. And so they have imprinted the energy coding structure with more lifetimes or segments of lifetimes, not complete lifetimes, segments of memory. And they do that because they need the body that we hold to have a very specific array of coding formulas to fulfill the life plan that we have set for ourselves, which is why we then need to talk about the oversoul. The oversoul is just a misinterpreted idea in many conversations. The oversoul is really what we really are. The oversoul is our greater self. So I would prefer to call the oversoul our higher self. Now, that's still not the soul. That's, to me, our greater energy of what is real from beyond the soul. So we can call it an oversoul. We can call it a higher spirit. We can call it whatever we want. but it's us at a higher frequency range of existence that is aligned to the light that we really are from beyond the coding construct. So the oversoul to me is a reference to the higher part of ourselves. It is timeless, therefore it knows our future, it knows our past. It's us. So if we were to shed the body right now, we would become what we are, and then that's our oversoul, if you want to give it a name. But I don't want to limit what we are to the word soul, because the word soul is a specifically human evolutionary frequency that used to belong to a collective evolutionary frequency that had many experiences in many lives, in many timelines, to achieve a goal of awareness. And then that soul, that collective soul, would integrate with a higher spiritual essence from a universal level, and then it would be learning and growing and expanding from there. And that's the way it used to originally work. But in this program, we adopt a blueprint, and then we use that blueprint and add to that blueprint, and then we get born in a way that allows us to fulfill our purpose. And then, of course, we ask, what is our purpose? And our purpose is to awaken to the greatest potential possible within the light frequency that we are. It's not about changing this program. It's not about battling this program. This program is only the interface. We're not here to change the program, because the program was created by the greater energies that we are for a particular purpose. And I've mentioned this before, and it's not a very popular view because people want to see the world can be changed and made better. And I agree with that. I would dearly love for the world to be a happier place to live in. I really would. But I understand as well that most of it is a backdrop. And that's the word that Alonus used in the mid-90s. And again, it's a challenging view because most people are resonating only to their human frequency and they want it to get better. But that's okay. Of course we do. We don't want war. We don't want famine. We don't want destruction. We don't want power imbalances. We don't want everything from taxes to disease. No one wants that kind of thing. Of course we don't. We remember a place, and we remember a world and an existence where these things are foreign. These things are absolutely not a part of what it's like to exist as anything, let alone a human being. And so, of course, we don't want adversity and pain. We don't want that. At the same time, this program was constructed as a system of entry into the duplicate space. And this program and all that we see around us is a backdrop. And why does it look this way? It looks this way because it's based upon the original experiment that occurred against humanity by an alien consortium. It is an experiment. It's the memory of an experiment. And so our most important task, our purpose, is to resonate to the highest realm of light we can within our being, which means being highly aware that our journeys through the night when we sleep and our energy that we carry through the day are probably the two most important assets that you have. Two most vital and important things that we carry is our awareness that we are more than who we believe we are, and our awareness that we live within a construct that is artificial and is not under the control of dark forces. It is under the control of greater light forces who have placed it here as a doorway to other places that we need to access into, and we do on an everyday level. I have 30 years of night state experiences and journaling to back all this up, because every night, being out of the body most nights, the more you remember, the more profound it becomes. And they often said, that the adjoining space was where all the battles were. We never understood that, but it's what it actually is. Here, we have to survive on the surface, but through the night and through the day sometimes, our whole energy is operating beyond the physical human body. And sometimes we meet people that we talk to and we find a connection and we will exchange information. Sometimes we will have things to do physically because we're all here tonight, because we're all exploring, we're all looking. This is all about understanding what our purpose is. But firstly, the most important thing is to resonate to the inner light, and the inner light understands the purpose of your life, and that is to connect to it as much as possible, but also interface with this world. We have to function here as well, so we have to be aware of. That's why the duality is so important. We are who we are, and then we have to be aware of what we are, and what we are is the most dominant frequency when we tune into it. And so, again, sometimes an unpopular view, but There is so much to this reality that is not real. We have to be aware that we exist beyond it first, and then we exist in it second. But we're here for a very important reason. So the oversoul is another word for the higher part of ourself. But we adopt a soul to come in here. So God is an interesting one because it's used so destructively here. And I believe that when a lot of people talk about God, they're talking about something very, very beautiful. They're talking about something very illuminated. They're talking about the oneness of all things. But God itself, Alonus once said that God was a central chamber. And what that means is, if we look at connecting to the source, and we look at labeling that source as God, or we look at looking at that source as being the ultimate, we have to be aware that the source is the point of creation of the duplicate. And so the source is creating everything that went wrong, because the source itself is fueled by an energy that was originally corrupted. And so you have an essence of energy that often looks like light, but holds nothing but darkness, because this whole world promises so much and it delivers a lot of darkness. And so I've not come across a religion or a belief system that really aligns to anything beyond the source. And what we know is that the source is the creative formulas of creation, obviously, but beyond the source is the real. And so the source also comes from somewhere. And so when we look at the structure of space and we look at the fact that there was an original program, and then the original program a section was taken off, which involved the Earth for the experiment, and then it was recreated, and then it was refashioned as a duplicate chamber, which incorporated many, many worlds in a part of the duplicate chamber. Then that source of energy is what created the entire duplicate chamber. So we have to be very careful that, are we talking about the essence of light, or are we talking about the source? Because they're arguably two very different things. They're very different to me. So many times, I don't really want to be inflammatory at all, but so many times when people form a belief system, they form a belief system through fear, or they form a belief system through needing to be in control of something, or they form a belief system through desperation. Now, we have to be aware that the source itself is a function of energy, and it creates a formula of reality. And that is the whole problem here, is that reality that we're here to be a part of inverting is what went wrong. And so God, if people look at God as the source of creation, well, creation here is the problem. And so if we go beyond the source and look at the fact that there is light beyond the source, and the source is only one central point of light, there are 10 central points of light. So, and that really has a lot of credibility when we look at the fact that space actually is a 10-dimensional structure of energy. But my main point is that when we look at God and we want to label something as God, I just want people to be careful, because the source of creation is really, and has been, the source of a lot of problems for a long time. It's the essence of light beyond the source that is where we all come from. We come through the source to get to here, but we're not of the source, if that makes sense. When we understand that the whole structure of space is a construct, then that which created the construct, if the construct is corrupted, is also corrupted. And so it's refashioned for something beyond it in order to fix it. And that's, in crude terms, why we're here. And that kind of gets us to the third part about the universe. And so, again, the universe is what was created. So we have the duplicate space, which has 7 universal frequencies. And in those 7 universal frequencies, we have many, many worlds, many, many layers of space, many, many planets, many, many interdimensional worlds. And so what was created was a universal spectrum. And that universal spectrum was originally created for experiences, but was repurposed for an experiment, which turned into a corrupted version of the original program. And so the universe is a product of the source of creation, and the source of creation is a fabricated central chamber through which light projects to create a code of reality such as what we see. Now that's that's a complex statement to make, but that's what the difference is. And we come from beyond all of that. And I think knowing we come from beyond all of that, I myself, I'm not sure if anyone else feels this way. This is why I originally began searching. As a young boy, I would leave my body. I would talk to people who in spirit were there. I never felt at home, and I never understood really how to be at ease in this world. Never did. And so I was quite an introvert, grew up, had more experiences. I would have things come in my room. I would have things walk through the walls, just not understanding what on earth this reality was. And then, of course, 18 years old, the documentary has the experience as one of the first sections is when I left my body and went out into the universe and found that it had boundaries. And those boundaries made no sense. So it was all impossible, including me. And that's when I started to realise that something very, very unusual was happening here. And the definition of reality had to be changed. Now, all this happened before I even had the wonderful, incredible pleasure of meeting Diane, who ran the first workshop in February 1993 is when I first met Diane. And this will happen before then. So I was already driven with a need to know, as I think you all have a need to know. And so these things come from within us, and that's my point. They come from within us. What I've been blessed with, and what we've all been blessed with when we do have the chance, is to have experiences, dreams, remember things that help us understand that we are not alone, and that we are certainly from somewhere far beyond the chaos and the calamity of a program that seems to be out of control. And I know that so many experiences have been out of my body through the night and delving deep, deep into the past where everything went wrong. And that was accessible because of the shift that occurred in February 2020. And coming face to face with energies that are our own brothers and sisters out there who have forgotten and who have turned, and then seeing wars being waged in space, being in spacecraft the size of planets. And it sounds all very sci-fi, but I promise you it's very, very real. And you come back to your body and you wake up and you may remember dreams, you may not remember dreams, but there's this feeling of, oh, I'm here again, or what do I do today? Where can I find purpose? And how do I function? And we all have to be our own source of answers to that question. But what we're looking at is the fact that we all have an essence of light that does come from beyond the fabric of illusion and construct. And when we're in this construct, to me, making sense of our inner story is very, very important. And that could involve past lives. It could involve other lives from other worlds. It could involve future lives. It's a big place. And some of us have memories, which I think is a very powerful driving force of a lot of people's fears and a lot of people, and originally mine as well. We all come in with memories of other time frames and other worlds and other experiences where we perhaps think we failed, or things went badly and things didn't work, or there was destruction. There was all kinds of experiences that are unpleasant and that shook us up, that made us feel unsafe. And all these experiences are in the memory bank because they happened. And that's the power of the greater plan, is that because all time is simultaneous and all rotations of space are simultaneous, all of the things that once went wrong are still happening on one level of space. They're being remedied on another, and they've all finished on another. And sometimes we would have the pleasure, the honour of a greater energy would speak sometimes, where it would speak from beyond everything. It would speak from the point of, I don't know what word to use, the point of light, where it's all over and we've all got back home and we're still here, in human terms, vacating the space. And when an energy like that speaks, it's hard to digest for the human consciousness, but your heart just pounds out of your chest and you know that it's right. And so some energies speak from the memory of the construct, and some energies speak from the memory of the rescue, and some energies speak from the memory of it all being finished already. And it's all just an echo of a sound that has to be inverted and restored back to a single point. And this is the complexity, but the simplicity is the greater energies that exist are us, and they know all things, but we're only allowed to know some things. So I'm not sure what light language was when Pauline asked that. I'm not sure what light language means. Has anyone heard the term light language? Eileen, what do you interpret light language to be? And Kathleen?
It's when someone starts talking in a language that we really don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It sounds all gobbledygook, or it has quite a rhyme to it.
Okay, I know what you mean. I've heard that before.
So Naomi that comes on the call with Grant,
mm-hmm.
she's been speaking in light language for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. And does she know what it means by feeling, or does she not know what it means?
I don't know that she knows what it means. Sometimes other people can interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure how she actually uses it. It comes through if she's doing healing or anything like that, I think, yeah.
Well, I'm only going to say this because this is what I feel, and this is what I believe with the experiences I've had. Diane never had that. I've never had that. It's always been words. It's always been perceivable, conceivable concepts and constructs for the human consciousness. But it sounds to me, and it seems to me, that she's interpreting a layer of frequency that's very close to her consciousness and may be designed for another part of her mind and not necessarily for the human consciousness. But it's being interpreted and projected, perhaps. It sounds to me either it's information that's designed for the consciousness that is coded, or it's information that is not designed for the consciousness, but she is perceiving and she's sharing. Alonis or Michael, he, Amon, none of them have ever spoken. Even a lot of the commanders that spoke in the earlier years, when we were very much amongst a lot of the old program information, no one ever spoke in a language other than this, because we had to understand. So I would suggest that it's another layer of frequency not interpreted by the human brain, but it's coming through unfiltered, or it's her perception of energy being translated through her verbal sense. That's what I would suggest.
The Christians call it speaking in tongues, and then someone interprets it.
Yeah, speaking in tongues is
different.
Yeah, definitely. And I've done a lot of work with this over the years with different things, and then regression work. And so a lot of times, what Diane and I found is that people are conveying their subconscious. So it's not actually channeling; it's actually conveying one's subconscious. So it's fictional. It's not actually anything in particular. I've heard one gentleman speak in tongue not too long ago who came to one of my sessions who he was trying to understand this. And my energy, I could detect no coherence. I could detect no energy of presence. I could detect no message. It was just this... I don't know. Well, it was. I'm trying to find a different word for it, because he certainly was committed to it. So to him, it meant something. But I do believe in that circumstance and many other circumstances I've come across that a lot of people who believe they're channeling are actually processing subconscious information, or even making it up, trying to translate something that they don't know how to translate, or it's a memory of another language that they don't know, but they're trying to blurt it out any way that they can. So sometimes it's well-intentioned, but not all the time does it actually be legitimate. So
maybe it's a memory of the Tower of Babel when our language was confounded.
Well, even that's a historical myth. So I think that's more symbolic. I think that is... so again, look at the Tower of Babel, and we look at what does that symbolically represent? What it represents is that something divided humanity into many languages so they couldn't understand each other. Now, let's look at that symbolically, and let's look at the history that we've talked about with the structure of space. There was a unified sound of all humanity. Let's make that symbolic to the original program that had coherence and order and structure. something entered to break it apart. So a tower is a vertical system of energy with many, many floors. Now that's the universal symbology. Vertical system of energy with many, many levels. So something came in to the environment, it broke apart the vertical symmetry of sound, and it dispelled human beings into disarray. Now, that's exactly what happened with the experiment when the greater energy fell, broke apart the cohesion of sound, and everyone was scattered to the winds. Operatives went to hide, and no one could speak the same language because people forgot, and people took on different masks and different worlds. So the Tower of Babel is a symbolic story and factored into the history of the program as a trigger for those of us who understand what it means to subconsciously recognise what's actually happening. There is so much information, and Alana said in 1994, if I remember correctly, I asked him about some mythological things, and he told me that mythology was a clue to understand what's really happening, but not the mystical, because the mystical tends to be a bit of a hoo-ha version of energy and spirit and all these things which really are more ephemeral and really are not really based in actuality but more based in imagery and fantasy. But when we look at the mythological, we have stories from the Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, we have Persian mythology, we have very ancient mythologies. And mythologies tend to be built upon, such as the Titans and the gods, mythologies tend to be built on legitimate structures of information that are then turned into stories. So, for example, the original Titans, and then the gods overthrew the Titans. Okay, well, let's go back to the original program again. We have an original greater energy structure which created time, space, and the cosmos and the earth. And then we have gods, which are now fantasized about in every Marvel film that you see. And you've got gods who then take over and defeat the Titans. So lesser beings, which then there's demigods from those gods. So lesser beings infused with humans take over and destroy Titans who were responsible for creation. So the original program energies, which were great, respectful and vast, are broken down by godlike energies who are only interested in power and creation and all kinds of different activities which really or only ever end up in war and destruction. And they're always fighting against each other. So the concept I'm trying to create here is the fact that you've got mythology which says original information broken apart, corrupted by new characters, of which integrated with human beings. And so you have a lot of truth in the symbology of mythology, but not the actuality of mythology. And so the Tower of Babel, to me, is exactly the same thing, which is fascinating.
Talking about Titans, if you look at some of the ancient buildings around, are they just all illusion then? Because they definitely weren't our 100-year generation that built them with pick and shovel.
Oh, goodness, no.
They were a civilization.
Oh, they absolutely were. So the Titans weren't humans. The Titans were greater energy structures. So that's clear. But let's look at the program. The program is a construct of many different layers and eras of memory. This is why no one finds Atlantis, because Atlantis is alluded to in this program, but it doesn't exist in this program. So people run around the world trying to find the remnants of Atlantis, and they find bits and pieces, but they'll never find it because it doesn't exist in this program. This program is only a block of information that doesn't have the history. So Atlantis and Lemuria, which is Mu, those things existed in the first replay structure of the original attempt to rectify the duplicate space. They failed, and so they've not been included in the new version. So this current version doesn't have those in it, and that's why you never find Atlantis in this program, not ever. And so things that, like, for example, the Tiwanaku, things like all the Aztec ruins, things like the temples, Egypt pyramids, everything that we find, Machu Picchu, everything that we find, they're all, and I say this often, it's very important, we have to see this reality as a mosaic. So it's a big patchwork quilt of different structures of memory, and that's why things don't make sense. Like, for example, why did the Mayans suddenly disappear overnight? Why are they all suddenly gone? Well, it's because the program information stops at the construction, and then the history of the people isn't in this program. And so these are the reality of a reality where information is stitched together to form a structure of program that is built for purpose to penetrate into the duplicate space. And so all those temples, yes, they're absolutely correct. There are so many remnants of giant humans. There are so many remnants of architecture, of so many remnants of sophisticated technologies, and they're all genuinely legitimate from different eras. I've got a past life in Atlantis, and I've got a past life in Lemuria, and so I remember them vividly. I know what they look like, I know what it feels like, but they're not here. And so when we look at the fact that there are structures of civilization, and there's some remnants of some civilizations in this program. Easter Island, even New Zealand. We talked once before about New Zealand. The Alpine spine of New Zealand is one of the original mountain ridges of the old continent of Lemuria. And so, but this is the bit that's left in this program. And that's why New Zealand's so important. It's a very important structure of energy for this section of the greater plan. But they didn't need the rest of it. So they've reconstructed this version with the information they needed. And so New Zealand is very important, very important. And there's a lot of energy pockets here, a lot of vortexes here, and a lot of very deep energy layers here. This is why we're here. And so you've got a lot of structures, remnants of civilizations, memory systems, all put together. It's almost like taking a bit from all these different places and putting them all into the same room and expecting it to make sense. It never will. But when you understand that they're pieces from different programs, different civilizations, different memory modules that are stitched together, that's when we realise it's a patchwork quilt or a mosaic of memory that's deliberately put together as a coding system that's precisely organised to fulfil a certain purpose. And that kind of wonder, that kind of enormity astounds me. It humbles me every day. I find more things every day. I look around. I have more experiences. I think I've mentioned to everyone about what happened at Queenstown that time with the vortex. Actually, Tracy, I'm not sure if you and Gracie know that one, but essentially I'd never been to Queenstown before years ago. And as I approached Queenstown up from Cromwell, I could feel the energy start to change. As I got to Queenstown, I knew there was an enormous vortex over the Queenstown Lake area that was the biggest I'd ever felt, and it was incredibly powerful. Then, of course, I mapped it out up past Glenorchy. I could feel it, and I mapped it down through Arrowtown. Then there was also a pocket in Dunedin, and it was only after I left my body that night that I went out of this reality through the lake, came back, spent my time in Queenstown, and then learnt from a friend's friend that there was actually a military survey done, and they'd picked up all the electromagnetic anomalies in the area which matched what I had felt. But also there was this compression on the Lake Wakatipu in Queenstown, where of course it rises and falls 20 centimetres every 27 minutes or vice versa, and no one knows why. Well, I can tell you why, because there's a rotating vortex over the lake which compresses the molecules in the water and then releases the molecules in the water, and that's the rotation of the tide change of the lakes, because of course lakes don't have tides. And so this kind of thing is what I'm talking about. Everything is purpose built, everything is purpose placed, everything is precisely where it needs to be. Part of a much bigger experience range, that one, but that was a very particular example because it was extremely powerful. And so when we look at how everything's built, and we look at like the pyramids of Giza, we were told that it's only the main one that really is a factor in this. It's not the other ones, it's just the main one. And of course that was a frequency resonator. When you go back to the authentic Egyptian times, it was a frequency generator. It was to do with electric charge with the Nile through the labyrinth underneath, and it was a generator, and it's at star alignments and so forth and so on. Mars connection because of the Sphinx. There's so many parts to that story which are fascinating. But again, it's just a bit of beautiful stonework now. It sits there and it forms a function of energy. It's a redundant function of energy, and of course it's almost the geographical centre of the planet, I believe, and so it's positioned there because it needs to be there. And so the Aztec civilization was very important with the original program, with a lot of the reptilian energy. There was a lot of alignments through planetary systems with the original continents. So there's lots of connections, but everything is precisely put together intricately. And that's why it is so fascinating. That's why I spend a lot of time connecting mythology through to this mosaic that we've got, through to my own past lives, through to my own astral body experience, out-of-body experiences, through to the research that I've got that I'm surrounded by here. And so everything has its place. So I don't mean to segue into too many different areas at once. I just get excited because there's just so much to discover. Okay, so that's kind of what we look at, is that everything's got its purpose and everything's got its place. And the planet is full of grid coordinates, as we know. So yes, there's ley lines, latitude, longitude, etc., etc. But there's ley lines, of course, everywhere. There's entry and exit points everywhere. They are... This level of reality is only a very small version of what we see. And so that's why energetically, if you can tune into, and it just takes practice, everyone can do it. If you can tune in and trust your feelings, you will feel energy flow. You will feel where vortexes are. You will feel interchange. There was one experience, when was it? That's right. Through this very strange and wonderful series of events, when I was in Queenstown, I went to visit a client's father who wanted to see me because he had a lot of paranormal activity at his house. And so her father called me, wanted me to come out. So I went out to his house, very big place, near Shotover River, so very big cutting river through, obviously, the Queenstown area. And there was a big house there, and he had a lot of paranormal activity, a lot of terrible things going on in his house. I went along, had a look, and we traced. I went into the side shed area where there was the main concentration of energy in this particular place, and it was a very powerful ley line. So what we had in this area, we had the energy was very rarefied, but we had this very powerful line cutting through his property, which intersected one of his sheds, and it was probably one of the strongest ley lines I've ever encountered. But it was fractured. And so he wouldn't go near the room because he was afraid that it was going to trigger something, and he obviously had some unpleasant experiences. Anyway, so I went into the shed area, and I walked into the middle of the ley line because I wanted to stand in the energy point, and I wanted to understand what it was. And when I stood in the middle, it was like kind of like an electric current. It was very powerful, high frequency, very, very powerful energy. And I stood in the middle of it, and I just wanted to sort of get into the energy of it, and I did. And what I found was that it was a breach between dimensions, and there was a lot of interdimensional activity coming in and out of that particular ley line. So they'd fractured it, and it was actually a portal from a very close-by dimension. And they weren't the most pleasant of characters, but we'd encountered them before, so I knew what they were. So that what I did is we just closed the gap, and we fused it back and restored the original coding formula of that ley line, and the energy changed, and it didn't have any problems anymore. So it's that kind of thing that when you really understand energy and you look at it all as a program, and this is, again, I don't mean to sound dramatic about it, but when you trust that you have an ability, I'm not talking about putting yourself in harm's way, but when you have an ability to tune in and learn about your energy, not to be powerful, not to be important, but to be aware that you have an ability within your greater energy that is able to navigate space. And so when these kinds of things happen, it tells us that it's just like in the Matrix, when he realizes that he comes from beyond it and he has an ability inside of it. My point with that is to suggest that if you can just start to use your energy and tune into what you know and what you feel. I'm not talking about manipulation. That's not what it's about. What I'm talking about is when you tune into your energy field, when you are aware that you have abilities, you can read the environment, you can understand it's all a program. And from your greater energy, it's all a program, and a program to be respected. The only reason I was allowed to seal that gap is because it needed to be sealed. It wasn't because I wanted to, it was because it was time. It wasn't about stepping in there and fixing something. It was about the fact that something had to be changed in that space. And we learned a lot of information in that moment from that dimensional rift.
We had a similar experience with one going right through our property and right through the living room, and there was a vortex there. And a Maori lady from the North Island, before she even met me, was told by Spirit that one day she'd meet this person, and they explained the house to her, our house to her. And eventually I did meet her, and she said, oh, you're the lady Spirit gave me, that you've got this vortex in your living room and right through your property, and we have to come and close it. So she came back with me, came back down to our place. She closed it, but there was three spaceship loads, she said, of entities, and they were the little pink ones that were stuck in the Maniatoto, and she had to exit them. But she cleared all that, and we never had any problems.
The program at various times in its own defence would create energy manifestations, characters, things like that. So we know that that's a part of what did happen. We know that's a part of their. Again, the agenda behind that was to stop people waking up. It was to stop people from having the belief in their own energy ability, because one of the greatest tools, and I've mentioned this before, but it sort of comes back around to it, one of the most important things to remember is that a lot of our people either had to run and hide in the beginning, or they got afraid and they forgot what their true heritage was. And a lot of people over a lot of years have been very afraid to come out because of the memories they've got. And the best way to keep an energy being asleep is to make it afraid to look. And so a lot of times thought forms were created and construction of energy was made to scare people. And this is why, and I've said this before as well, that's why Hollywood is very invested in building movies and TV shows around absolute horror, is because they have to hide the truth behind the fear. And so they don't want people looking, and so they make things that scratch under the house, they make things that bang on walls, they do all kinds of things because they want people to be afraid. And that's actually the bulk of Diane's and my last 10 years of work, is that we researched and travelled through many, many, many places, which I guess the cliche is where angels fear to tread. But we had to go there because we had to go to places where they didn't want us to be, which is why we were attacked so much, because we didn't stop. And Diane certainly didn't stop. And we had to go through many, many places, many different worlds, many different layers of the etheric plane and many different astral planes, where a lot of alien interaction had overwhelmed different thought world planes, and a lot of experimentation was still going on. And so these aren't pretty places, they weren't pretty places. And so a lot of these things were created as thought forms that don't actually exist in order to scare the bejesus out of people who may have left their body in the night and had a bad dream and thought, I'm never going to inquire into what it means because I'm too scared. Or that's why religion, go back to the God situation, that's why religion was created. This world is built on oppositional rules, and it's all built on conditional rules about if you want this, you got to do that. And so these things create a separation, and they create fear, and people get afraid because of everything from movies through to being 5 years old and having something step into the room that scares the pants off you, and then you wake up, so you grow up feeling that it's too scary to even look. And that's how they kept a lot of our people quiet and a lot of our people afraid. And many, many people, and most people I speak to privately as well, through these kinds of sessions have a lot of experiences as children where they were visited, or they were either harassed, or they had even those that came across as very friendly, but were ultimately trying to steer them away from remembering that they were more than who they believe they are. And so coercive methods were used a lot in the original attempt to keep our people suppressed. But make no mistake about it, when this was originally created, it was designed as a way to stop people waking up. And that's why the great ones had to come in consciously, and that's why there were so many permutations of the original plan. The original plan was to come in, a beautiful energy, to enter into this structure of space and restore the barriers and restore the new program and get everyone home. As simple as that. But of course, entering into this program, it was broken, and the greater energy fell under the weight of the corruption, and its power of light turned into a power of dark, and it fell. Hence the stories of Lucifer, and hence every other dark fallen being. And that energy became the source of darkness, but it was really a being of light underneath the darkness. And so there's great misunderstanding about darkness, But the central chamber, which is the energy of creation, is not the brother that we have, not the greater energy that we have. It is a product created by a corrupted formula in the centre point of creation. Again, but that's another discussion. So I'm jumping from a few different things, but there is a lot of hopefully a lot of information in there just to help. It's such an amazing place that we are because of the purpose that we're here. And so whether it comes to out-of-body experiences, or it comes to vortexes, or it comes to the lineage of New Zealand being a remnant of ancient Lemuria, or it comes to a mosaic of memory and continents, eras, or it comes to our own mosaic of personal memory. For example, we each have, as I said before, with the soul blueprint and the energy blueprint, we all have many facets of many different worlds, human and otherwise, that we hold. And it's about understanding our heritage and understanding that we are more than who we believe we are at all times. All right. Is there any comments or questions about that?
It's interesting the triggers we have or are given, because I'm just doing a little book for my twin daughter Debbie, who's come back home to take over the bees, fourth generation of the bees. And I'm putting this little book together on her journey, and we called her Debbie, and we didn't know it actually means honeybee. And out of the 5 children, she's the only one that's shown interest in the honeybees and is now come back home to take over. So it's almost like it was a trigger. Yeah,
beautiful little symmetry. Yeah. And from the smallest moment like that, we see the symmetry of a program that's built upon interconnected design. So maybe you were aware of your future self finding out the meaning of the name, and so therefore your past self called her that name to have a future connection.
Yeah, we didn't know at the time, but it's interesting. And I don't know if you know what I know what your name means, but it might be different to you. But mine is light, actually.
Eileen, Eileen, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm aware of mine as well. And we all have a structure and a pattern of energy, but everything is coded. That's why even
I hated the name, but
it was the right one.
In recent years, when I've discovered what it was, I thought, oh, okay, little parts of light.
Yeah, that's right, and that's why we have to take everything as a part of a greater whole. So we look at numerology and these kinds of things. They all have a place. The star signs, the moon rising, the houses, everything has its place. Nothing is definitively correct on its own, but they all merge into a greater story. And that's the important part of it all. So I factor in everything. Everything I learn becomes a part of the whole. And when you look at that, you are more easily able to see the pattern, because the pattern is there. And each one of us has a different pattern. And that's why we're not about duplicating each other. We're all the same and yet different, because we all come from the same source, and yet we all have a different pattern of energy, and we all have a purpose. And if anyone ever feels like their life has no purpose, then I would suggest we step back and look at our whole life and try and find the pattern, and try and find how we perceive our life. How do we feel about our life? How do we feel about our future? What can we find out about ourselves that we don't know yet? There's always going to be, because again, this reality, it is a greater sense of the greater within the lesser within the greater. And so every small thing has a big permutation. Every big thing will have a smaller echo of itself, usually before it shows itself in a big way. So I love observing patterns in this world, not repeating patterns necessarily, but patterns, because I believe patterns are a doorway to greater patterns, which are a bit of a fingerprint of the greater plan. And if I can find something that shows me a fingerprint of a greater plan, you won't wipe the smile off my face for the rest of the day, because it's just something that is beautifully intrinsic about our reality, that we have everything we need. And And that's a powerful statement, but we do. And we're never given anything we can't handle. That's also an important thing to note as well, because I remember once that was a question asked in one of the groups around the mid-90s or maybe the late 90s, because sometimes we go through some very tough times. I think all of us will probably agree that we've all had some tough times, and may still, unfortunately, because that's what life in a simulated program is. And we're here in a place which we never created, the great ones never wanted, but it's purposely built. So when we have something that happens, there's a purpose for everything. If we understand that purpose, then we can at least find some way to hold ourselves in the centre of that. And there's a meditation I'm going to put online not too long away. I'll plan to do it over the Christmas break. There's 3. One of the meditations is called The Pond and the Waterfall, and it was built largely from Diane's work, and then we reshaped it into a meditation. And that's a meditation that allows us to release everything we don't need from the mind and nervous system, and then to replenish ourselves with a deeper energy. So I'll be releasing this, putting it together over the Christmas break. Another one of them is called the inner flame, and that is where we go into a center point and become the flame, which is a very precious meditation. I'll be putting online as well shortly. But there's a series of 3 I'm going to be putting up online, and you'll be welcome to use those at any time as well. From the it'll probably be on the Alliance Foundation site, but it may also be on my private site, which is mindbodyhealing.co.nz. There's meditations on there. If you want to look at those, you're more than welcome to. There's a Journey Home series on there, which are more aligned to what we're talking about, called mindbodyhealing.co.nz. And there's free meditations on there. We'll be doing the Gateway one shortly, which is, of course, the Gateway one is a very particular one to be able to travel inwardly, because that's really the only place to go. We're not here to travel into outer space. We're here to travel into inner space. And that's the reason that we're all here. Really, that is. And going back to memory blueprints, we all have a coding system which is specifically designed to tune into the places you need to go. If people want to look at, mapping their night state, I only say it because I do. I've always have done since I was very young. The way I started doing it was laying in bed at night, and as I put my head under the pillow, I would just tell myself, I'm ready to remember my dreams. I'm ready to remember my dreams, and I'm safe to remember my dreams. And anything that would otherwise make me feel unsafe is the past. And I'm interested in what I can remember. We have to take away the fear value that was instilled into the deeper levels of the subconscious mind. We have to take away the thoughts and feelings of apprehension that we have to remember the night state, because that's our biggest barrier most of the time. Then in the morning, don't wake up to an alarm, don't wake up to a mobile phone, for goodness sake. Wake up and keep your eyes closed and try and tune back into the feeling that you had through the night. And even if it's just a feeling, sometimes when we're under great stress, you can wake up and feel completely calm. And you think, this is interesting, I'm completely calm. I've had the most active night, I've been restless, but yet I've woken up so deeply calm. Why is that? And you'll find a reason for that. And there'll be a being attached to it, there'll be an experience attached to it, and you keep tuning in. If you can do that kind of thing, you will prime your intuitive senses, and you will open up the bridge between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind. And that's one of the most powerful things that we would ask you to do, would be to actively engage your deep mind to reassure your subconscious mind that you are safe. And when you know you are safe and you wake up interested in whatever happened, then you have no blockages and no barriers. And that's how I would ask.
That busy at night, is that why our blood pressure is high in the morning?
Well, your blood pressure could be high because of your life issues as well. But
first thing in the morning.
Yes, absolutely. Because if your subconscious narration is hooked and busy processing your day-to-day activities and day-to-day pressures, that's going to create a kind of density in your subconscious, which means you're still processing day-to-day life stuff. And so whilst that's natural and whilst that's normal, and this is in the whole conversation of dream psychology and subconscious and deep conscious experiences, the subconscious, if you're waking up and it's all been about the day, that's why it's important that we know ourselves and do our best to manage our life in the quietest, most centered way we can. What we can't change, we can't change. What we can change, we can change. But yes, blood pressure can be up because you are experiencing life processing. But below that, there will always be deeper mind activity, and that's the key. If we can get below the life stuff, which isn't too hard when you're quiet inside, because when you're quiet inside, life doesn't matter as much. And you can tune into the feeling beneath the thought, and that's the important thing to note, the feeling beneath the thought. Then you can tune in and ask yourself, what does that feel? Does it feel happy? And sometimes I will have a thread. We usually have a very vivid dream attached to it, but there will be a thread, and it might be, I just feel like stars. Well, what does that feel like? The stars feel blue. Why do the stars feel blue? Well, they feel blue because I've seen someone wearing blue. Oh, okay. Who was wearing blue? Well, there was actually a few of them. Oh, was there really? Where were they? Well, there's a big room with a table and everything's luminous. Okay, what were they saying? Well, I feel very calm about something. What do I get from that? Well, I'm feeling that in the next month there's going to be something I need to pay attention to. And suddenly, by tuning in layer after layer after layer, you build a story. And so tuning in is very important to be able to build a story. And then you trust what you get. And so that kind of practice is deeply important to understand everything else we've talked about tonight, which is the complexity, and it's the depth, and it's the placement of where we are in this illusion, this construct. I don't mind being in a very finite construct because I know that it's such a small part of the rest of my being. And I know that greater energies have put me here and they put you here for a very precious purpose. And I'm not shy in saying the same thing again, as you probably noticed, because I think they're important sometimes to pull back around into the conversation. But for every one of us that came here, there were so many who wanted to. It's an honour and a privilege to be here. It's an honour and a privilege to be a part of something so beautiful and so powerfully important to help those who were stuck and lost. And I remember that every day, because every day it matters. And so, yep, life gets hard. Yes, you lose. Yes, sometimes you win. But it's an honour and a privilege. And I think if we tune into that as well, we can have a great deal of communication again to another part of our being, because, again, that kind of level of perception, which isn't easily come by sometimes, because, as I said, we all have some pretty tough times. Certainly know that very well. And if you can tune into the fact that even the toughest stuff has a reason, doesn't make it okay, but it makes it have a purpose, then you can see beyond it. And if you can see beyond your greatest fear or beyond the toughest thing, then you are more than who you believe you are. And that's the definition of being an operative here in this program, being more than who you believe you are. It's a pretty special thing.
Jason, you mentioned about, tuning in and not being apprehensive and being safe. And a few nights ago, I just said out loud, why am I here? What am I here to remember?
Beautiful.
And I don't remember my dreams. I need to tune in more, obviously. But I remember the Hulk, that green colour, the Hulk. It was like an alarm clock, and it had like Roman black digits on it, and it was green. I have no idea. To me, it looked like some form of alien box. I don't know. But anyway, that's what I can't make any sense of it whatsoever.
Fascinating. Well, I can venture interpretation if you'd like. Green's an important colour because when we go back and look at Egyptian mythology, and we also go back and look at and we see a lot of this in the symbolic stories of even Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz. All these stories are permutations of an original coding structure, even the Emerald tablets when you go back into mythology. So emerald green is a symbolic colour of the city that's located in the real original program. So that green is often present in in dreams, but I've had it many times. Depends on what kind of green it is, but typically green to me is a representation. So if you saw it in a clock or a structure, the symbol, you may have a Roman memory if it's Roman numerals, but it may be something else. But it tells me that it's most likely a frame of reference from probably the original program that you're connecting to something beyond the matrix, and it's giving you probably a coded time sequence. So I would say that it's probably giving your subconscious information about a coded time sequence for the future. So if you knew what the Roman numerals were, you'd probably be able to get more clarification. But if I saw that, and I can only speak to it as if I had seen it, if I saw that, and of course it's up to you to interpret, but if I saw that, I would look at that as a structure of energy to do with original time, giving me a coded timing sequence for my life that I needed to be aware of. And so there'll be layers and layers of information in that, and that's the best thing about dreams and experiences. There are layers and layers of information. They're like a multi-dimensional kind of experience. But that's wonderful. I love hearing you say that because bring it on, and then you bring it on. And it's the consistency, that's the key. It's not do it once, but it's to do it over and over again, because that consistency is what gets the results.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I highly resonated when you spoke about Egypt. I've been there. I've been to the pyramids. I've been to the Sphinx, and it is quite an energy. It's just I mean, this is going back about 12 years ago now, but I'll never forget. And I've got a papyrus frame and some Egyptian things. And it's just very energetic. It's very it's a high frequency, something about it.
It definitely that's an experience I haven't had the pleasure of having, so that's wonderful. It will be high amplitude energy there, because we know that it's connected through to Mars, which is very important between the original construct based on Lemurian times. So there's a link between like a triangle link between Lemuria via Mars, and Mars has like a multi-phased energy structure, and then it comes into this program through Egypt. And Egypt was, of course, the time frame where Diane and I knew each other from the first human life. And of course, Diane was a character called Asmar, which is Asmar was a high priest in Egypt, in the inner temples, inner mystery schools. And that was where a lot of interdimensional invasion occurred, and things started to go wrong from Earth. So it became a very powerful entry point for multidimensional energies. And so it's a resonator, as we said before, and I can understand you would have felt it to be a powerful energy system, because it's a link-up, and it's a part of a greater energy structure of there's a lot of information about Egypt, actually, but it's a part of a greater energy that is definitely still at work in the inversion process, because this is all about inversion. The reason that we're here is to do with inversion, and that's also called the evolution of light, because the evolution of life goes out, the evolution of light goes in, and that's why the feminine is so important in this, is because the masculine energy is outward, the feminine energy is inward, and that's why there's such an overindulgence of unbalanced masculine energy in this world, in this program, is because it's out of balance. And so the whole structure of energy is about inverting into a point, which means the feminine, the balanced feminine, the light structure comes into one point. And that's how this whole structure of energy gets restored to balance, by neutralizing and balancing energy, which then is inverted. And that's how we all go home, is once it's all inverted into a single point. And so Egypt and the pyramid is a part of that process of energy. It's kind of like a junction between multi-spatial reality, because it's a junction. Particularly, that's why we look at Mars and the Sphinx, of course, with the connection with the Sphinx. But we look at the fact that there is a very large connection and a powerful connection between the original entry of the new program, Lemuria, and the last one, which is now. And therefore you have what they call the first and the last, which is the beginning and the end. And when the beginning and the end come together, what have you got? You've got an inversion into one point. And so this is we're talking about a very small wheel as a part of a very, very big wheel. That's multiple spaces in duration. And by that I mean we have to look at space as being a rotation of creation. And when you have not only creation, but you have creation again and again and again and again and again. You have multi-spatial existence, not just space, not just time, not just creation, but multiples of them, one being an iteration of the other. And then when the first and the last come together, you have the end.
Is that why Elon Musk wants to go to Mars?
Well, there is no Mars for Elon Musk. That's why it'll never work. That's why the space operations are a joke. That's why no one went to the moon. That's why no one gets past the Van Allen belt. No one gets past the firmament frequency layer. And so there's so much fabrication. Obviously the Flat Earth documentary, brilliant documentary. It just shows you why this is a limited construct. Obviously, except for the portals that exit here, but in terms of physicality, it's an interesting story. It's almost a joke. You'd laugh at it if it wasn't so serious. Yeah, so Musk isn't going anywhere.
No.
Yeah, I love hearing experiences like that, Gracie. There's even visions like that. There'll be so many layers behind that. If anyone has things, I document every day. Everything I get, I write down, and I love it because I will find, one of my particular loves is when I look in my journal and I have a dream, and it'll be a certain thing, and then I think, I've heard that before. Where have I heard it? So I'll go back, and a year ago to the day, there'll be a dream with that in it as well, and then 5 years ago to the day, there'll be a dream with that in it as well, and you see this beautiful symmetry of the mind that. In our waking lives, 5 years go by, but to the mind, it's the same moment separated by time. And you have these symbols and these occurrences, or even beings. Sometimes I've spoken to beings, or they've spoken to me more accurately, or had an experience with a being. And then, of course, you'll be triggered by it with another dream, and then you'll realise that there's a connection with dates, there's a time of the year connection. They're saying the same thing, and it might be 7 or 8 years apart. It's humbling because you realise how small you are, but how important everything that we are is at the same time. We are so precious and yet so small. There's a lot of grace in that. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Is anyone share anything else?
I have a silly question.
There's no silly. There's only silly answers, Gracie.
Okay, we're talking about portals and moving, travelling whilst we're sleeping. You know those big crystal portals? What's your view on that? Is that just... Crystal
portals? Can you be more specific?
When you go to those amazing crystal shops, or Garden World, for example.
Okay,
and there's massive quartz crystal or amethyst with the hole, and they call that a crystal portal.
Yeah. It's more of a play on words, unfortunately. So, for example, crystal itself, regular crystal holds energy, but it's not a good capacitor. It doesn't hold a lot of energy for long. It dissipates quite quickly, and it doesn't charge up. It'll hold, but it dissipates. So there's a lot of stereotypical commentary around crystals. Yes, I like crystals. They're very lovely, and they do have an energy contingency, but they don't harness and focus energy. Now, at the same time, we look at Queenstown. Let's look at that example again at Queenstown. So, for example, one of the things I could feel going up through the mountains, you can feel all the gold in the ground. You can feel the frequency of the gold in the ground, and you can feel the resonance of the quartz. If you're sensitive, you can feel that resonance. So, the quartz and gold and all the minerals, that has a frequency, and it clearly somehow, not that those elements in the ground create the vortex, that they'll be a product of interspatial energy, but certain composite materials and certain gems and certain things do have an ability to hold energy, but not regular crystal. With portals, you may get a structure of energy, such as a crystalline structure or a metallic or other structure of energy, but on its own, it's not going to be a portal. It has to be in a certain place and sometimes even a certain time. So it's the grid coordination in the program that it sits in, and it's the object itself that may or may not resonate to that grid coordination. So that's why sometimes you will find portals in grid lines, crossovers, of course. Sometimes you'll find portals where there is perhaps maybe a location that's had a lot of trauma, a very like a war site, you'll have a lot of dense energy which can penetrate the layers of the space and actually create a sensitivity to interdimensional energy because it's a dense energy. And other times you'll have both. You'll have, places that are built upon, like castles and things where they knew where these ley lines were and they put them right on the junction, and there'll be a double whammy. There'll be a lot of memory, a lot of conflict and an energy ley line there. So there'll be a natural portal open there. But crystals on their own, no, they clarified that for us in the very beginning. They said that a lot of people are interested in crystals because we all know that there's other lives and other things where crystals, they're appealing, they're really lovely, they're sort of quite energetic. But in terms of portals, not in my experience, and I don't believe so.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
It's okay. It's more about the coordinates and the conjunction of energy.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why, for example, that place in Shotover River in Queenstown, that was a very major intersection of energy. So you had a major ley line and a minor ley line, and there'd been a fracture. So they didn't need anything else. The shed could have been there. It could have not been there. It wouldn't have mattered. It was the constituency of the energy of the space that made the portal open.
Okay. Thank you.
It's okay. Yeah.
I was just quickly going to, my input on light language, just going back.
Yes.
For me, it comes through multiple different ways. So one might be, I might be aware of something in my body, and there might be a stuckness in my body, and then this light language comes through. And so it's like frequency. It's frequency, and it just unlocks, and then that just the resistance or whatever's there in the body, the holding on, just disappears.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like and as I'm speaking it, the vibration in my body as I speak it kind of unravels whatever's there. And I may have an awareness of what it is. I may get words and I may not get words. And it can be, it can come from multiple different places, sometimes very pure, sometimes I get a sense it's an off-planet galactic. For example, when Sedna first came into our orbit, I was aware of this energy body coming in to our kind of like orbit, if you like. It's like this new energy. So I got kind of like a light language, and it's the light language sort of it was like a interface. So the light language came through, and then I got a sense of the feeling of it, therefore the meaning of what it was conveying. Same with 3i Atlas. And then Pam Gregory, like a few weeks later, starts talking about Sedna, or people start talking about 3i Atlas. So it's like, for me, it's like it's a step down of a frequency that my consciousness would not understand.
It's called decoding. That's right. So, did everyone ever see the Jodie Foster film Contact many years ago? So in that film, they had a signal, and that signal was coming through, and it was just this garbled array of sound, almost like a transmitted sound. And that's all it was, and they couldn't figure it out until they found how to decode it, and then it turned into a three-dimensional array of instructions and mathematical formulas and measurements and everything. So I have no doubt, Kathleen, because you mentioned sort of feeling things like that before, I've no doubt that you're detecting on another level the incoming frequency that takes time to decode down to the human level, and you're interpreting the human physical coding, and you're feeling actually a release of the coding system. So to me, it's decoding, and sometimes we need to decode things, and other times we don't. So that to me certainly sounds like a decoding. Now, the things like the whole Atlas thing, that's information in the program. There is no outer space. We know that it's a construct, and so but it's information in the program. It's just as real as us, because we're information in the program as well, and so all of these things are coordinated. So I believe that you're detecting information moving through the program that you're decoding for your own energy system. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Anyone else here to say anything?
On that topic on frequency, I have a frequency wand. What are your thoughts on that? Because a lot of practitioners talk about, the future of healing and the frequency, and it's different. It's different.
Yeah, yes. More of a cellular frequency.
Machines, the old Bright machines.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
What's your thought on stuff like that?
So, in terms of a cellular effect.
Yes,
Definitely. I've done a lot of research and looked into a lot of the microcurrent treatment and the sound treatment. I've got a little Bexley unit I just received the other day, researching that at the moment in terms of harmonics and frequency harmonics for the body. I use them to embed them into meditations for different. I'm making a whole new series of meditations for healing, and they're going to be embedded with different frequencies for different types of physiological needs. So I do ascribe to that very much so. I think we're talking about a biological cellular frequency there, so that's different to an energetic frequency. And I think, but still very legitimate, because frequency has a very powerful way to heal, and that kind of resonance is a very real thing. So depending on, I guess, the wand or I haven't used one of those things, but I know it's to do with cellular health. So it's a very legitimate in terms of the body as a frequency harmony unit, and so you get it into a stable harmonic state, and the body has the ability to help recharge and heal itself. If someone has an issue, I still see it as a temporary measure unless you get to the core of the thought behind the frequency disruption. So I use already my work, and I will be using the therapeutic meditation work in conjunction with this. So talking one-to-one and understanding, well, where does it come from? Where is the thought? Where is the feeling? Where's the disruption? So, but yes, I do.
I love what you're doing, because a lot of people have those blocks, and they need this to help release at a deeper level.
They do, they do. And I think that's a really wonderful thing, that you can do it from both ends, because sometimes the body is in pain. And sometimes it's hard to concentrate on an emotional issue when you're in pain. And so I do a lot of work around pain relief, about somatic therapy. That's sort of my day job stuff. And so by doing a lot of work around that, you understand that you do still need to provide physical relief alongside emotional and deeper psychological relief. So I think they go hand in hand. Very interesting. Okay. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, everything from Lemuria to Egypt to frequency wands and crystals. It's and Queenstown portals. It's all there. Yeah. But that's the beauty of it. It's so much inspires me, and you go through every day and you do your everyday stuff. But when you never forget. You cannot forget, and you look at everything differently. And that's why these discussions are very precious. A mind that wants to know is a precious mind. And when we start to remember, we can feel isolated. We can feel alone. We can, the cliche, a room full of people, yet there you are on your own. And so it's very important to understand that we're never alone, and that our attunement to our own sound is really tuning into a spectrum of sound. And that's why all of the energies that have ever spoken, they've all been a part of a greater whole. And I remember for many years we would hear Alonis and Michael speak in particular, two of the main energies that spoke for many, many years, and still come in. And I remember once, I think Maria said to you this recently, once Michael, who it's a very powerful galactic style of energy, and then he referred to the great ones. And it was quite shocking to read it in a document many years later. I didn't pick up on it at the time, because when an energy you perceive to be a greater energy calls others greater energy, you realise how vast the spectrum is of light. And I remember Alonis, who obviously spoke many, many thousands and thousands of times, and he would call himself a lowly representative of those greater. And it's the humility that always humbles me. The humility of energies that don't seek anything from you except that which you wish to give, but also don't stop if you get afraid. They'll love you to the end of time, but they also have a job to do, and they can be tough and they can be loving all at once, and they usually are. But they are not human, and they are light, and light only knows itself. And so realising that you're never alone, to me, is one of the most precious gifts I was ever given. And so that sense of not being separate is a gift. When you know it, it's a gift. So these conversations are precious because we share something verbally, visually, but we're also sharing so much more underneath, and that's a very precious thing. So I honour that, and I'm always very grateful when people take the time to contribute or just listen and share, because we all resonate then to a frequency, and that's kind of coming back around full circle to the purpose, because probably if I had to describe what is the purpose of each one's life, it is to resonate the energy of your memory of the real through everything you do. Doesn't matter what you're doing, doesn't matter whether you're shopping, doesn't matter whether you're sleeping, eating, having this conversation now, you never forget. And what that does is it sets up a chain reaction in your whole being that never turns off. That makes a great deal of difference to me, is that when people just carry the sound that they are, because that permeates the space, of which there's 16 levels of space in this structure, then there's 32, and then there's 64, and it keeps evolving, but getting smaller at the same time. It's a fractal thing. But when we can do that, we harmonise together, and that's the most important thing. So we'll do another one next year, and I'm happy to keep sharing and love when people share back. And questions are always a doorway to awareness, because we're not discovering anything here, we're remembering. And that's the key. That's the biggest difference of all. So it's a real pleasure. I appreciate everyone being here tonight.